All right, I am here with
Mhm.
uh, Mr. Donald Scoggins for Mayor
Scoggins.
Scoggins. I'm sorry about that, Mr. Donald Scoggins for Mayor of Baltimore, Maryland. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good. The weather is better than I thought it was going to be. They had forecasted snow, but looks pretty bright outside.
Well, I'm happy to hear that. Uh,
Hmm.
so, uh, so what inspired you to run for mayor?
Okay. I'll tell you what, you know what? I never thought I'd want to do this, run for mayor of a city like Baltimore, but a couple of years ago, I visited the city with the intention of working on a project that dealt with revitalization the urban areas. Baltimore has a tremendous amount of vacant and blighted properties, and I said, well, maybe I'll get my fraternity involved in wanting to buy some of these properties and fix them up and resell them. As affordable housing for first-time home buyers or whatever. Then the fraternity, I think they decided not to do it because it may be a little bit of a heavy lifting for them because they're not into business like I am. I have a background in urban planning and housing and real estate development and affordable housing and things like that. I've been an investor and a landlord, so I'm kind of not new to the business, so to speak. But what happened was when I started poking around, I found out that Baltimore is a very difficult city to navigate to get anything done. It's quite dysfunctional, and I hate to say it, but the uh, there's some issues that are in Baltimore that I do not think lends itself to really improving it the way it should be improved. And I would like to see what I can do to help do that because I'm very much concerned about the next generation. And the education system in Baltimore is just it's astoundingly dysfunctional.
Yeah, the city of Baltimore is well known as being one of the most heavily Democrat areas for the entire country.
Mhm.
So, what inspired you to run as a Republican?
Well, a couple of things. Number one is that my mindset does not gel with what the Democratic Party represents. I'm very entrepreneurial. I'm very limited government oriented. I'm very much into economics. I'm a person who likes to actually get things done versus just talking about it. And also, I feel that the Democratic Party, to me, they do not represent what I represent, and I cannot run under a banner of a party that doesn't represent what I represent, at least what I would like to represent. And I just don't see. And I know it's going to be a high bar to try to run for mayor of Baltimore, but I see it as introducing an alternative way of thinking, an alternative way of governing. Baltimore has been led by Democrats ever since 1963. They've never had a Republican mayor since that time. And during that time, what's that, 60 years about? Since that time, from what I see and what I understand, the city has continually deteriorated. And I do not feel uh, my conscience would not allow me to know that this exists within my region, so to speak, without trying to do something about it. And then, and then I came to when I came to Baltimore and started talking to people, because at first, I just recently moved to Baltimore. You have to be in Baltimore at least 1 year, be a resident at least 1 year prior to the election, which is November the 5th, I believe, coming up. And so I made that change that I had to legally do that. So it didn't bother me to do that. But what did bother me was that as I talked to people, many of them said, well, they don't care where I come from. And party doesn't bother them as long as they feel that I can do what I want to do. And I think that Baltimore is so entrenched the dysfunctionality of it is so entrenched. It's entrenched in just about every aspect of the city: the media, the politics, the government, the educational system. Just about everything is wrong in Baltimore. And you have people here who've been here for a long time. They are somewhat intimidated to try to do anything because Baltimore, being so democratic, its tentacles are in just about every aspect of life here. You know, people who have government jobs, Democrat, you know, whatever they do, they are fearful of speaking out. And you have many nonprofit organizations here that are in some kind of way either getting local government money or they're in some kind of way tied in with the local government, and they fear being candid about the problems here. And without being candid about the problems and trying to solve them, I don't see where it's going to go. It's going to be, what I want to do is not going to be dealt with in 8 years. This is going to be I would say a 50+ year endeavor, but it has to start somewhere.
So, what are some of those problems that you're looking to address?
You say, what are some of them, or what are the symptoms?
What are some of the problems you
Well,
are looking?
they have been. Well, Baltimore is a very sprawling city, and it has a tremendous transportation road network, as I see it. The problem, there's several problems, but the key problem I would say is the education here. Baltimore has about a 50% dropout rate, and the kids, many of the young people here are not. They're bright, they're smart as I don't know what, but they're just not interested in the curriculum that's being that's being presented to them in Baltimore. So I think that the educational system needs to be totally reformed. That's number one. Number two, the local government is too bloated for 500 plus thousand people population here. It needs to be pared down tremendously. You have people on top of people doing things, and that doesn't help. You know, it needs to be reorganized. It needs to be the management needs to be restructured. And another thing is that, and I hate to say this, but the media is a problem. The media constantly reminds people that, well, you know, Baltimore is a democratic city. You know, every time you always hear about them describing it as a democratic city, but then when I talk to people, many of them, I know it's a democratic city, but when I talk to many of them, quite a few say, well, I'm independent, I don't vote, you know, that type of thing. So there is an opening here, and I just think that some sunshine or some honesty needs to be presented, and that's what I would like to do. I mean, I'm not coming into this blind, you know, being blinded. I know that it's going to be a high bar, but I'm willing to devote a year or two to this effort to see what I can do to improve the city, because you got so many young people who are depending on, and they need a functioning city for them to survive.
Yeah, and one of the things that Baltimore is also known for, it doesn't get mentioned nearly as much as a city like Chicago, but the crime rate.
Yeah. Well, the crime rate, that all, you know, see, all that ties into when you really, when you look, when you, as they say, connect the dots, or when you think back on from whence we came, or how did we get to this point, you have to kind of go back 60 years when in 1964, when Lyndon Johnson signed the Civil Rights Bill. That was the beginning of what I would say the destruction of the Black community. That in the mid 60s was approaching the end of legalized apartheid in the United States. That's what it was, apartheid. We were a segregated country primarily, basically, but as a segregated country, the various ethnic groups had their own neighborhoods. You know, you had commerce was pretty thriving, pretty good. You had the educational system, but what happened was the Civil Rights Bill was signed, and then that, quote unquote, that as they say, that ended segregation, but it wasn't it wasn't actual, it was de facto, still de facto a racist society. And ever since then, I think the powers to be has been scheming to return to the majority in a city like Baltimore. Baltimore is a 60% minority city, but it does not own itself. The people who own Baltimore are the boys who have as they say, he who has the gold makes the rules, and that's where it has been in Baltimore. The school system has been destroyed. You have the unions have a stranglehold on the educational system. They are not teaching what these young people need to be taught, considering where they are today. Many of these young people come from very dysfunctional families. So they need to be, we need to come up with a way to give them life skills. We need to come up, we need to have more trades in the schools. We probably need to do a flip in the curriculum, have less academics and more trades and life skills, and give these young people something to do. I talk to them and they say they don't have anything to do, and they don't feel that the political leadership here cares about them. And they're absolutely true. And one reason why they don't care about them is because the Baltimore has been one party rule for so long that the party takes the folks for granted. They don't have a need. They don't have a need. I'll put it like this: they don't have any motivation to actually do what has to be done because they're going to get elected anyway. Just being a Democrat, they get elected. So, so why? So so that's basically it. The institutions up and down the line have just have failed the city. Even the clergy here has a lot to be desired. You got a church on almost every corner and everything, bleeding people dry with money and stuff. So what can you do? And the power structure here, they have their sycophant politicians that get elected year after year, so to persuade the people to vote Democrat. So there we are. And economics is a misnomer when it comes to the inner city of Baltimore. The first thing, back in the day, back in the Jim Crow days, the communities were segregated, but at least we had a viable, pretty viable economic system within our community. Today, you'd be hard pressed to find decent restaurants in the Black community, sit-down restaurants. They don't have that anymore. We had banks, we had lending institute, we had things, but then all that went away with quote unquote integration. And the leaders and the people who are considered leaders today, they don't have an economic agenda. The only thing they talk about is, well, anyway, they don't have an economic agenda. I'll leave that. That's basically it.
Yeah. So you mentioned you're an urban planner, and you looked at the some of those abandoned properties and everything. So how do you plan to get that revitalized and to bring those like up to, say, like the Inner Arbor area of Baltimore?
Right. Well, I think what needs to be done in Baltimore, we need to do is what I would call a systematic and surgically revitalization of the various communities. Baltimore is made up of many, many, many neighborhoods, and many, many, many neighborhoods are just beautiful. They're just out of this world. But you have some neighborhoods that are very challenging. And I think that what we need to do is stress redevelopment or revitalization of the neighborhoods that are very challenging. And being quite frank, many of them have become what I would call enclaves of poverty. We need to break up that enclave of poverty and perhaps do more scattered site development where you have 15,000, some what the figures said around 15,000 vacant properties in Baltimore. Those properties that can be redeveloped or can be restored, especially those that are owned, that are tax held properties. We need to perhaps use that as scattered sites for some of the occupants in public housing or government owned housing. And what I would do is redevelop some of these the most chronically blighted, or the most chronically poverty and crime-ridden housing complexes. That's what you need to do. I mean, that's you mentioned that. I mean, we need to start someplace. There's some areas in Baltimore where there are blocks and blocks and blocks of just abandoned and vacant housing. That's probably it would cost more to fix them up than what they're worth. So we may just have to somewhat, we have to go in there and just completely. People may not like this term, but we may have to do what they call what is it? Back in the '60s, they call it urban renewal. You have to do some urban renewal in a systematic way, and that does not necessarily mean moving people out. You may have to move some people around, but not move them out of the city, which is what happened with urban in the back in the '60s when you have urban planning. They destroyed certain neighborhoods for highways and different things like that. But some of these neighborhoods are already destroyed, so you're not really destroying anything. What I would do is retrofit some of the housing. Most of these houses that are boarded up and vacant, they're very narrow two-story houses that maybe were appropriate back in the 20s and 30s and 40s, but now in 2024, those houses are very obsolete. So they should be demolished anyway and rebuilt into something that's more applicable today. And maybe instead of being 2 stories, you can have 4 story, have triplexes or maybe duplexes or things like that to house some of the people and have more green space instead of having everybody jammed up on top of each other. That's what I would do. And like I said, this is not going to be done overnight, but I will put together a plan for that so that people will at least see there's a plan in place to do some of these things. But one of the impediments is that it all boils down to politics. You have some folks who, I hate to say this, but it could be some conspiracy for the city to rot even further so that it will be more conducive for a certain long-term plan that that I hate to talk about, but I'll say it, but I don't want to see that happen, but I fear that's going to happen. I won't be here, but there will be people your age will probably be around, but not me. You'll probably be older than me when it happens, but
Yeah. So, is there anything else part of your platform that you didn't already mention that you're looking to do to help out the city of Baltimore?
Well, I think another thing I would like to do in some kind of way, because I think this is going to necessarily be done too. Baltimore is a fragmented city in terms of the population. It's almost like us against them, that type of thing. Even though we supposed to be an integrated society, but you still have pockets of, if not necessarily physically, but mentally, there are pockets of separatism where people don't feel a part of the city. People live in one part of the city are fearful of going in the other parts of the city. And I think for the city to survive, everyone should feel comfortable in going in any place in the city they want to go to. I mean, people, you've probably heard of the Inner Harbor, which is downtown in for places towards Fells Point and Canton, where it's a more upscale neighborhoods, inner city type neighborhoods down there. And then you have this areas up further uptown near John Hopkins and such. But we need to make sure that the center part of the city is improved too. And that's what we're going to have to do. And I would like to see if we can do that. Just bring people together and have democracy. We need to have democracy in the city and not just talk about it. We need to have a change of thinking in the city.
Yeah, certainly a task for any candidate trying to float something so blue in an election.
Say that again. I'm sorry.
I said that is certainly a difficult task for a Republican candidate in a city that has been so blue and deeply blue for such a long time.
Mm.
But as we just saw in the city of Charleston, South Carolina, just a couple of months ago, they elected their first Republican mayor since the 1870s.
Mm-hmm.
That is an awful long time.
Right, right.
So much longer
Well,
than Baltimore.
yeah, well, hopefully something can happen in Baltimore that will change the paradigm of what we've seen for almost 60 years or 60 years. But Charleston, I would imagine, is a little bit different than because I'm going to be honest about it. There's a demographic situation in Baltimore where it's over about 60% black, I believe, and I think there is some racial dynamics in play in Baltimore that may not be in play down in uh, South Carolina. From what I know of many South Carolinians, the I don't think they have the urban issues that we have here in Baltimore in terms of the blight and and elsewhere. The population is just a little different. And plus, here you have what they call entrenched political leadership that calls the shots. In many cases, they determine who's going to get elected, and they seem to promote people to get elected that they can handle, if you know what I mean. They can manipulate. That's those are the people who get elected.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you brought up the racial aspect of Baltimore. So it is about 60%. I looked up the census from 2020. It's up to 60% being a black majority city at this point. Uh, so, do you feel that you, being a black man yourself, would have a better shot at it as a Republican candidate?
Well, put it like this. I think, well, let me just say this. I believe I would have a decent shot at it because number one, while I'm a Republican, I'm an independent Republican. I'm not a I'm not a party person. I mean, the party, the way in its current iteration, has left me many, many, many years ago. My identification with the Republican Party is as it existed shortly after it was founded. I'm a Booker T. Washington, Frederick Douglass, uh, Ed Brooke, Colin Powell type Republican. I believe in working across the aisle. With Baltimore being uh, so heavily Democrat, it would be foolish for me to try to push certain doctrines that I know are are foreign in an area like Baltimore. But I do know one thing that people will agree with me on is that we do need to lower the poverty rate. We do need to increase economic opportunities here. We do need to better the school system. We do need to make the local government more accountable. And those are things that I will look on. I'm not going to be necessarily pushing any particular political ideology. I'm going to be pushing common sense types of things. If a person, I would love for a person to just say, "Well, I'm going to vote for Don Scoggins." They're not don't necessarily have to say, "Well, I'm voting for the Republican." Vote for Don Scoggins. That's who I want them to vote for.
Yeah, uh, that sounds very good. A nice independent, and that's very true for a lot of local elections. Anyway, there's a lot of Democrats that get elected within what would be considered Republican counties all over the country. There's a lot of Republicans elected in local offices in Democrat counties as well. So it's very mixed and matched. And when it comes down to local issues, they're not nearly as partisan as people may think.
That's right. One thing I would like to say too that is how should I put it? I'll tell you one thing that somewhat distresses me is that not just in Baltimore, but I would say nationally, within communities of color, or particularly Black communities, the leadership seems to be more concerned with promoting the party than promoting interests of the people. It's almost like, well, we have to round up these blacks so they can go and vote for the Democrats. It's always rounding them up to vote for the party, but yet when they get in office, what do? they don't do anything. I mean, I've seen how government works. I've seen how other government works, where you have a less, where the population is not majority minority. I've seen how it works. They're very economic oriented, you know. And if you leave one constituency behind, that affects the other constituency. You see what I mean? You can have a town that's that's predominantly white, but if you have a neighborhood that's predominantly maybe black and Latino or lesser income communities, if they're struggling, that's going to radiate into the other parts of town. So it behooves the powers to be to make sure that all parts of the community is is vibrant as much as possible. You know, where people can go to and fro wherever they want to go and don't have to worry about getting shot and assaulted and elsewhere. You know, and I think that that is one of the biggest failings, I think, of the civil rights community, is that we push the civil rights leaders, so to speak. They've become co-opted by a particular by the Democratic Party, so that they are, in essence, they are tools of the Democratic Party to make sure that they stay in power. And they've come, and over the years, the Democratic Party has become very elitist. You know, it's the, you know, they become very elitist, whereby they don't necessarily look at uplifting the the disfortunate. What they look at is, in particular within the black community, we've become widgets. I would call us widgets of the all they think. If whenever a black person gets elected, oh, there's another Democrat. You know, there's another Democrat for us. You know, to keep us in power. Another, and to keep in order to keep in power, they have to have a dependent constituency to service. The Democratic Party is their modus operandi, or their plan, or their, how should I put it, their operating model is to have folks that have to be feeding them something. They have to be giving them something. And once you give people something, you're going to have to keep giving them something. Have you ever loaned someone some money? They said, well, can you loan me $5? Oh, okay, here's $5. Next week they come back for more. I've loaned people money, and next thing you know, they keep. And I said, well, don't you know somebody else? You know, so I'm just saying that that's what's been created in the black community for over 60 some years. We've become a permanent underclass. And I think that, fortunately, I do think that a lot of the young folks are beginning to see that, you know. And so I just hope that maybe I'll resonate some kind of way in Baltimore, because it's a beautiful town. It has a lot of natural amenities in terms. I just love the layout of it is great in terms of the infrastructure, where the streets are organized. You know, it's really from an urban planner standpoint, it's a very nicely laid out city. We just need to do something about the disfortunate part of town. That's all. And I think that over the years, a lot of the attention, a lot of the monies, a lot of the federal monies have been coming in, and they used what's this thing called tax credits. That I don't know if you're familiar with how tax credits are dealt with, but the states and all, they can issue certain kind of bonds, and it's a funding type of situation whereby they can issue subsidized type money to, this is a little simplistic, but they can issue subsidized money to do certain developments. And in Baltimore, a lot of that advantageous financing mechanism has been done for downtown, and it's uptown or in the communities. You don't see that. You know, you drive up in some parts of the center city, and you would tear your car apart trying to some of the roads and everything. And it's just mind-boggling how it's been neglected. And that's what's fueled me for doing it. This is 2000. Now we're in 2024. It doesn't make any sense for an area, for a city to be like this. And I will say another thing, that in my, really, I'm going to say this is very sincere. I'm very sincere when I say this, is that my hat goes off to the blacks who've been in Baltimore all these years and had to live in these kind of situations, because we do not have to live in this kind of a situation, but unfortunately many people do not have a choice. People just can't come pick up and leave and go where the living is easier or more advantageous to them and their family. There are too many people who have to stay here. So, and I'm just, I'm very, my hat goes off to people who've been living in that situation. And by me being retired, I'm an older person. I'm a senior citizen, as they say, and I don't have to. I can every now and then I can go to Outback Steakhouse and eat and not have to worry about certain things. So I feel that I've been blessed. My health is good and all, and I have a supportive family who they may not like what I'm doing, but they feel that if I'm happy doing it, then go ahead and do it. That type of thing. Not too many people my age want to take on something like this. They figure that, you know, but those that are younger are probably still in their career building stage, so they can't be candid. They can't say certain. They can't speak truth to power like I can. I mean, I don't fear. I don't fear speaking truth to power. So
Yeah, that
so
all
you see
sounds
how so you see how much an oddball I am.
yeah. So, well, I think that's just about all the questions that I had.
So tell me what you think. Do you think you know
I think I would love to see you as mayor of Baltimore.
you would? I tell you one thing: if I become mayor of Baltimore, it's not going to be business as usual, or if you want to call it business, it's not going to be. Things are not going to be as they've been, because I'm going to try to shake things up, and I think many people want to see things shaken up in Baltimore. And I really appreciate you having me on this on your podcast, on your program here.
Yep. Well, it was a pleasure having you here.
Okay.
I
didn't think I was wondering what I was going to be able to say, but you've asked me. You've pulled some things out of me that I didn't know if I was going to be able to say it or not. But once I start talking, I'm just like what they call it a person in jail who sings like a bird. Sings like whatever the term is.
Yep. You sang like a canary.
Sing like a canary. Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
Well, it was a pleasure having you here, and I wish you a good luck on your campaign.
Okay, and thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.